Welcome everyone to the Naked Founder On Location podcast, a business podcast where nothing is hidden. This episode of the Naked Founder podcast is sponsored by Financial, the home of money for women. Today, the Naked Founder is on location and we're visiting the offices of one of the UK's active 41 unicorns. A unicorn, obviously, is a company with a valuation of $1 billion, and Matillion became one of those in 2021 when it raised $150 million in Series E funding. Matthew Scullion is one of Matillion's co-founders and he's passionate about AI and data. Welcome, Matthew.
Thanks, Chris. Well, welcome to you. We're in my offices.
No, absolutely. And we've got a fantastic view over Manchester in the background as well.
God's own city, man.
God's own. We always start every episode of the Naked Founder podcast with the same question, which is this: what didn't they tell you about founding a business that you wish you'd known?
Well, probably how hard it is. If you want to, make money and get all the things that people perceive as being the bells and whistles of having a posh job, then absolutely don't be a founder CEO. It's very, very long and hard and arduous, and there are definitely easier ways to have a comfortable life.
And you've been doing it for a long time.
For this company, which has gone through multiple incarnations over this period of time, probably three major ones. But with Matillion, myself and my other co-founders, we've been involved with it for 15 years.
Okay.
So that's the overnight success, Chris.
Absolutely.
And then, I was also involved in another startup when I was much younger, ran that for a few years. It got bought. I worked for incarnations of the company that it got bought for, again, for a long time. So I'm lucky to have been involved in software entrepreneurialism, building businesses, leading teams for 30 years, Chris, 30 years. Which is a bit embarrassing.
It's not embarrassing. You started incredibly young. You were 17. I'm going to go back to that, actually. But I'm going to ask you a slightly curveball question, which is this, is that this is Matillion, okay, one of the UK's 41 active unicorns, Manchester's last unicorn, okay. And yet when you walk in, you don't see lots of Matillion signs. What you see a lot of is Maia. Now, you're passionate about AI. In fact, your lanyard has got Maia on it as well. And you've invested hundreds of millions of dollars in Maia. And you talked about the number of reincarnations of Matillion. Is that one of your reincarnations,
It
Maia?
is, yeah.
Just explain what Maia is, what it does, and why you've invested so heavily in it.
Sure. So first of all, what Maia is. So Maia is really the product platform and the go-to-market brand of my company. The company as a corporate entity is still called Matillion, but what we sell, what we talk about, how we turn up is Maia, and what a customer would buy from us is Maia. And what it specifically is, it's an AI-powered enterprise software technology. Specifically, it's what we call an AI data automation platform. So what that means in English is you'll have heard of AI, Chris.
Yeah, I think so.
And you might even have heard the term, and if you haven't, it's an important one to get across, the term of an agent.
Yeah.
And an agent is AI technology wrapped up in a box to do something, to have a raison d'etre and an end, right? It can solve a problem. It can do a task. That's an agent. Most all agents need or are going to need two bits of fuel that even the AI itself doesn't provide. They need data, information from a database probably, or from some other source to feed into it. Let's say it was an agent that was going to decide whether you get a mortgage or not. Well, it needs data about you, right? It needs your credit score and your salary information and what are the bills that you've got. So that'd be an example of data. If it was an agent that was going to find a free slot in your diary and organize a meeting with someone, then it needs the other person's times that they'd like to meet, and it needs your diary. So just two examples of data going into an agent. The other thing it needs is context. And by context, I mean, if I ask my assistants and running mate, Laura, Laura's my EA, most people know Laura better than me, she's amazing. If they say, I need to speak to Matthew about X sometime fairly urgently. Well, she knows what X means. She knows who Matthew is. And she kind of understands what fairly urgently means. Like, it doesn't mean in the next 5 minutes, and it doesn't mean in 3 months' time, right? She knows those things because she has context. And as humans, we do. We have context about things. And AI, unless you give it, doesn't have context. So agents tend to require data and context in order to do their jobs right. The people in businesses that have been able to provide data and context, just like all of us humans, they're constrained in terms of how much work they can do. And, we've worked in the data industry a long time, so we know that in general, the data teams inside of large companies, they were already struggling to provide all the data insights, the data products, the data-powered use cases to their businesses before, even when that was just giving it to other humans. But now we have thousands, tens of thousands of needs and opportunities to revolutionize the way we do business with AI and with agents, all of which need data and context. And you're going to end up in a world where you've got a machine scale need for data and context, but only a human scale ability to deliver it. So Maia, ironically enough, is an AI-powered solution to that problem. And what we mean by an AI data automation platform is a technology platform powered by AI that can provide that data and context to other AI agents and also to people and dashboards and all the things we used to use data for, but do that in a way that is profoundly faster, more accurate, more productive, ultimately, I suppose, more cost-effective than humans ever could. And that levels up this machine scale need to a machine scale ability to fulfill the need. And that's Maia. And that's really today what our company is all about, providing that AI data automation platform to customers.
Do we get to a point where we used to say, I'll Google that? Are we going to get to the point, or are we at the point where we'll Maia that?
So I think we've been for a while now at the point where people say we will ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini that rather than Google it. So I can't remember the last time I Google searched for something, to be honest, because why would you just get it to provide the pages to read yourself when you can just have the AI contextually read it for you and give you the exact answer that you need, like a gazillion times faster? Or maybe a second order version of that where it just does that before you've even asked. So if I'm going into a meeting, I will already have all the context that I need for that meeting pulled together for me by AI from various types of data sources, from recordings of previous meetings to what I can find out on the internet to what data we have on core systems here, so that I can be unbelievably prepared in the meeting, far greater than I could ever have been previously, because I would have never had time to do all the human work to do all that. So I think we're already well past that. Like, everybody should be doing that. In terms of will someone Maia something, that's not quite what it's for. So Maia is a platform that would be used by companies to provide their agents with data. And so if you've got an agent doing something for you, and I gave you a couple of examples of what those could be from, these are both fairly mundane ones, but scheduling a meeting or processing a mortgage request, but it could be like literally anything at all, then those agents need data to make that decision, and Maia provides that sort of data. But you can absolutely use Maia technology to answer a business question. So maybe you are the CEO of a company that makes outdoor apparel and equipment, right? And there's one of those in Manchester. And you want to know, I'd love to better understand, how the margin contribution of our breathable textile products is evolving over time, and which channels are the most profitable for it, and where should I take my product innovation next? Like, you can literally ask that question to Maia and it would answer it with data and give you not just a graph or a chart without humans needing to build it, which is pretty staggering, but also then give you guidance on how to interpret that data. So it wouldn't replace Google, but it would replace that sort of thing, and it's doing.
I'm going to set the scene. It's fascinating because you've always been a really good teacher. I think the danger sometimes of technologists is they can talk above the person they're talking to. You never do. You keep it to a level that's a simpleton like myself can understand. Just tell us, how much money have you invested as a business in Maia?
Well, many tens of millions. And I mean, at the moment, I think we feel in a very exciting place as a company. If you were to walk around Silicon Valley at the moment, there's, I think it's fair to say, a bunch of people running companies of, roughly the same order of magnitude as ours, maybe a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller, but, proper technology companies. And this is true even up to some very, very large ones, the sort that own skyscrapers in the middle of famous cities.
Yeah.
And the phrase that you hear quite a lot, Chris, is that they are looking for their second act. What I mean by that is that AI is, on the one hand, creating such incredible new opportunity for the way that people work and the way our economy operates, and therefore to build and create technology that makes use of it and participates in that future world that we're going to, but also so disruptive in changing the relevance of what we've all been doing for the last X years. And you could argue X is like all the way back to the Industrial Revolution if you wanted to, but certainly the last 10 or 20. And what people mean by looking for their second act is that they're like, I was relevant in the old world. Maybe I'm not quite as relevant to the new world. How do I reinvent myself for the AI native world that we're going forward in? And they use this phrase, looking for their second act. So Matillion was, I hope, one part lucky, two parts lots of hard and smart work. But we started looking for that second act several years ago. And we were building our successor platform, which turned out to be Maia. We actually started that work. Certainly, we were materially up and running at it in 2022, which is 4 years ago, and we will talk about doing it in 2021. Now, that would have required some incredible forward-looking vision from myself and other people here at Matillion. And one thing I have to say I don't like about that occasionally in my industry, I think maybe all industries, is we put down anything that goes well to our own individual brilliance, don't we? Whereas there's a lot of luck in life.
Yeah.
And so that part of the reason we were setting about that reinvention of ourselves was totally unrelated reasons. But thankfully for us, as we got started on it, contemporary AI started to come to the fore. And we could therefore say, we just happen to be getting started on rebuilding a next generation data platform. And this AI stuff looks exciting. Why don't we make our platform the world's first, best and only AI data automation platform? And we started doing that years ago. So where everybody else is sort of, not everybody, but many people and many famous and seminal companies are kind of thinking about this second act that they probably need to discover for themselves, invest in and make come true. We're in that really strong and lucky situation where we actually were having that thought several years ago. And now as AI is really changing the world, it turns, we turned up in the market with the first, best and only AI data automation platform, Maia. But yeah, it's many tens of millions. And
that's now paying a reward, is it?
Very much so. And if we'd not done it, I'd be looking a lot more furrowed and a lot less excited.
Yeah.
So
you're looking great.
And I'm feeling great. I mean, look, this market is crazy. And, one of the things AI is doing is reducing the barrier to entry to develop software. So, I mean, you and I were just talking about a version of this as we were getting ready for our podcast today. You were saying, maybe I should have a piece of technology that does X, Y, and Z. And I encouraged you to just go home and try out Claude Cowork and build it yourself. Yeah. Now, if you can build yourself that piece of technology, there's a much lower barrier to entry to building technology. And macro that out to my end of the market where we're building commercial products, just the speed at which competition can move now is just so fast because you do it all agentically. I mean, Anthropic, who are the company that make Claude, one of the things they do, which I think is just interesting and illustrative, is they almost, and I'm smoothing out some details of the story here, not least because I don't work there, so I don't know it in detail. But typically, the way that we would have worked back in the day of making things out of metal is, we'd have an idea, we'd discuss the idea a lot, then we'd draw it a lot of times to make sure what we were going to build is right. And then we'd probably make a prototype, and then we'd check that was right, and then we'd draw it some more, and then finally we'd sort of machine tool up and start making lots of it. And actually in software, it's pretty similar. We have a department in a software company called a product management department. Product management's job, simplifying it, is to listen and understand what customers need and translate that into product roadmap, which we then build. So when the customers get new features, they solve the problems that they need. It's kind of like the drawing room of, the draftsman of a software company. Anthropic now, they've totally reinvented that. They just build the product 10 times and throw away 9 of them and keep the best one, because the cost of building software has become so cheap, because the AI is doing most of the work for you, that it's more expensive to think about it properly and design it properly. It's more expensive to do that than just to build it 10 times and pick the best.
Do you think, two questions, because I want to talk to you about your founder journey, but the AI is such a, it's
much more interesting.
Open conversation, open conversation. But I mean, we're getting to the point now where we're getting like multi-million-pound turnover companies with 1 member of staff.
Yep.
Okay, and you think that will grow?
I think yes, and established multi-10 or 100 million pound companies disappearing because AI makes their business model irrelevant.
Okay.
And zooming that out, in general, I think most of us, not all of course, but most of us are materially under-indexed on just how profound what is happening with AI is.
I like examples, and we were talking off air before the recording started, and you were talking about Mrs. Scullion.
Yes.
And
secret behind my success.
Absolutely, absolutely. And she said that you're a technologist, so anything with technology, ask Matthew.
Yeah.
So she said, Matthew, I need to create a website for my business. Okay. And you spent about an hour and a half using the software that was available to create a fully functioning website with a picture of her relevant to her industry.
Yeah, so, and lots of people are doing this, but yeah, first of all, I mean, just for our amusement, we'll reflect on the fact that anyone who works in technology, all your relatives think you can fix printers and sort out the internet and, why have I got all these viruses? It's been a long time since I did any of that stuff, Chris, if ever in some cases. And Mrs. Scullion does actually know that in her defence, but nonetheless, my wife's a physiotherapist, and she spent a long time working in the NHS, but she was, sort of going it alone. So she needed a website. And I think she was thinking of spending some money on it. I was like, dude, you don't need to spend money. I was like, just build it on Lovable, don't you? And she's like, what? I was like, yeah, let me show you this. So we sit down, and she's not got a logo. Yeah. So first of all, we go on to an appropriate AI tool, and we just say, need a logo. Here's what the business does. Here's the colours that she likes. Here's what the company is called and why. Bosh, bosh, bosh. Give me 10 different logos. 30 seconds later, you've got 10 graphic designer quality logos. She's like, that one's perfect. Brilliant. Can I have all the different variations of that logo that I could possibly need and a colour palette to go with it, please? Yeah, done. Right, so now you've got the logo and brand pack. Once upon a time, even for a sole trader, that would have been minimum a few hundred, probably a few thousand quid to a local graphics design place, right? And then she's like, great, got a logo, got a colour scheme, need a website. So you go onto this site called Lovable, which everyone's using, so you'll have heard of.
It's the fastest growing tech business in Europe, at least it was last year.
Great business, lovely people as well. And, Lovable is for building that sort of thing, websites, low fidelity prototypes. It's like the ultimate vibe coding, no technology expectation, technology skill expectation at all, which suits me, Chris. So I go onto it and I'm like, right, she's a physiotherapist. She specializes in neuro rehab physio for stroke patients. She does Pilates. Part of the reason she's into those things, she used to be a dancer, and so she cares about body and posture and movement and muscles. She operates from here. She treats this sort of patient. Just put all this into a prompt. Here's the logo. Here's the colours. Bosh. And, a few minutes and a few tokens later, out pops a brilliant website. And then the other thing I was mentioning to you was normally on one of those kind of sole trader style websites, like the product's you, isn't it? So like if you had a website it'd probably have a photo of you on it. And, you know, we work in business, don't we, mate? So you'd probably be looking like that. But for a medical professional, you probably want to be in a medical setting, probably wearing the blue or the green or the white that medical professionals normally wear. And we just didn't have that kind of headshot of Caroline. So I go onto my phone, I pull out a nice family photo that we've taken recently, I pump it into an AI-powered website and says, can you just turn this into a headshot relevant for a website? She's a physiotherapist, so, you know, she needs to be wearing what physios wear in a medical setting, looking approachable but professional. 30 seconds later, out pops the professional headshot. Now, none of what I'm telling you there is any news to you or anyone else listening. The interesting thing is the impacts of that, right? Because she is a sole trader, and she would have normally got out the yellow pages, I suppose, or got onto, you know, Google Local, and she'd have found a photographer. She'd have found a graphics designer to do the logo, pick the colours. She'd have found some sort of marketing professional to help her with the copy and the story. And she'd have gone to a little website designer. You know, there was 10 of them in every town, wasn't there? And they would build her a website. And we didn't need any of those 4 things. We did it at our kitchen table in 2 hours from end to end. And now she has a lovely website, right? And so it's macroing that impact up to the global economy that's the interesting thing. And that's where I was coming from with that story.
And that's the point. It's like Block Jack Dorsey just announced Block are going to lose nearly half their staff because...
Who's Block, sorry?
Block, it's business in the US, set up by Jack Dorsey, the founder of X, and he's just announced that he's going to, like, half his staff because of AI.
Yeah.
And the point he was making is rather than have death by 1,000 cuts, let's get rid of X amount of people on the right terms with the right way of doing it. He said, this is where AI is. Okay, I'm going to move away from AI.
Okay.
A little bit. Because we could spend the next 3 hours talking about AI. Good. Okay, so there's a story that I love about you, and it was in the Sunday Times, 2021, when you were at Altrincham Grammar School, and you were going to take your French GCSE, and at the time you were described as a cheeky, slightly belligerent teenager, which I've never thought of you as belligerent. But your French teacher forecast you an E, and you went away and you spent 24 hours cramming and you got an A. Right. Is that story true of Matthew Scullion?
It is, yeah. I'm sure you've asked me if it's true before. I don't think it's necessarily something to show off about, is it? Maybe questions the standards of French GCSEs. The one extra detail I will give you is that teacher, he was a bloke called Mr. Cleland. Yeah. And I don't think he liked me very much in his French lessons. And looking back on it with the benefit of adult maturity, I think he was probably had a point. But in the oral part of the exam, you remember your French GCSEs? You had oral, listening, reading, writing?
I was the only person in my year who was excused from taking French or any foreign language because I was so bad.
So this guy, you walked into the oral and it was in like one of these little tiny rooms that you never otherwise went into in the school. And he had kind of a tape recorder and a little microphone, you know, kind of proto-podcast setup, I suppose, Chris. And the way it worked is there were 2 potential questions he could have asked, and I'd crammed for one of them. So it was a coin toss, and it landed, luckily for me, on the right side, and I had a kind of pre-prepared speech in my head, and I think maybe it was 10 minutes. I could speak on this topic for 10 minutes non-stop. And about halfway through, he managed to find a gap and ask me a question. And of course, because my plan, Chris, was to one-shot it, that was an AI term, to one-shot it from end to end, when he stopped to ask me a question, I couldn't answer it. To be fair on this bloke, though, I don't know if he's still alive, I hope he is, to be fair on him, he could see that I'd tried, and for the first time in 2 years, done a stroke of work, and he mimed what the question was. And you must be able to hear it on the tape, not that it will still exist, but I'm like, wee. And then I knew what he was talking about, and I carried on with the one shot. Yeah. And I ended up somehow fluking an A. But yes, totally true, mate.
But when I was at school, I went to a grammar school in Kent as well, and the French teacher got all the pupils, my classmates, to write Christopher has une grande tête, which I said to my mate, I said, what does tête mean? Head. So I said I've got a big head. I did have a big head. It was factually correct, but these days, that
Very
would
cool.
be, that wouldn't be approved on.
You'd be
Back
straight to
then.
the front page of the papers, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. Okay, so this is the Naked Founder podcast, talking about founding businesses. Okay, so when you're 17, you did what all 17-year-olds do. You co-founded a software business. Okay, have you always been a person who doesn't see the risks? You just come up with an idea and you say, hey, tell you what, let's just found a business. You know, that's a certain type of person thinks like that.
Well, I don't know, because I'm also in an totally unrelated data point apart from this one parallel I'll draw. I happen to not have brothers and sisters. And so people will often say, what is it like being an only child? And of course, the answer is, well, I've no idea, because I haven't experienced the other side of the A/B test, right? And so I don't know what it is that makes someone more or less comfortable or less comfortable with risk, or more or less likely to start a business or not start a business, or do any of the other wonderful things that human beings do. In terms of risk, what I've said to a few people over the years is, I do sometimes think that people don't necessarily quantify risk optimally for their situation. And so with risk, in one way of thinking about it is there's probability and there's impact.
Yeah.
And probability is how likely is this thing to happen or go wrong or crystallize, whatever. And then impact is what happens if it does. So, you know, meteorite hitting the Earth, very high impact, very low probability. Setting up a business and it going wrong, very high probability. But really, what's the impact, right? You know, you could also go to work and get fired, but no one doesn't not go to work because they're worried that they might get fired. You go to work anyway. So if you set up a business and it goes wrong, well, it's kind of not that different from getting fired, is it? You just have to go and get another job or start another business. So I've always wondered if people sort of maybe just miscalculate the risk, and they don't do it because they think there's a high probability of it going wrong. Correct, there is.
It's a bit like relationships, isn't it? I'm not going to go out with that person because it probably won't work.
Yeah, and you just end up being miserable. Exactly. So, and then also, if you just try and think a little bit through a framework like that, then it can also reduce the probability of it going wrong. So we've kind of touched a couple of times on the fact that my business is now 15 years old, but it's not done exactly the same thing across those 15 years. And some cheeky journalistic cove such as you, Chris, might describe that as pivoting.
Yeah.
Whereas I just describe it as staying relevant and reinventing yourself and not denying what's going on in the outside world.
Do you hate the word pivot?
No, not really. No, okay. It's just but it's just I always think when it's a pivot, it makes it sound like we're geniuses, or whereas oftentimes you're just responding to the outside world, right? But and then, like, the opposite, therefore, would be kind of irrelevance, wouldn't it? And those companies that are looking for their second act that we mentioned earlier, some of them might not find it. They'll become irrelevant and die because they didn't pivot, I suppose.
Well, Blockbuster, Kodak, you know, the corporate graveyard is full of companies like that.
Yeah.
Here we are. It was the amazing offices. And I don't think you can tell us what we're looking at. We've got some of the cubicles there, but just tell us a bit about this space. So this is the sort of 2026 version of a Victorian factory, I suppose. So we are, in many ways, just a manufacturing company. We design and build products here in Manchester. That's what you can see happening. We have a bunch of very elite software engineers. We have UI, UX design people. We have AI and machine learning people, product designers, UX people. And then surrounding that, we've got all the other things business like ours needs, like marketing, HR, finance, sales.
You sold your business, okay, then 2011, you got a decent job.
I didn't sell my business. It wasn't my business. I was a co-founder of it.
You're a co-founder of the business. Okay.
The business was sold.
Okay, the business was sold. You got to 2011. okay, you're earning a six-figure salary, things are going well, etc., etc., and then you and your co-founder Ed Thompson, who is the CTO,
Yes.
decided to give it all up and to launch Matillion. Okay, now you describe Matillion as because we're talking about data engineers. Now, data engineers were in short supply, and like I say, this is why if you'd not been a technologist, you would have been a very good teacher. You just defined.
It was quite fancy being a teacher.
You'd have been very, very good at it. Mr. Scullion's lessons would have been the stuff of legend. You describe data engineers. It's like refining data from an iron ore into steel so it's ready to use. That's what Matillion did. So when you launched Matillion and you gave it your six-figure salary, once again, did it feel like a risk, or was it a question of risk versus reward, etc.? Is that how you approached it when you launched Matillion?
So another thing I often say to people considering starting their own business is, and it's a version of what I said a few minutes ago to your opening question, is you can't half do it. You've got to be all in. And it's like a totally all-consuming thing. So I've been doing this 15 years. I feel like we are halfway through the first move on the chessboard. And, I still work like 2x plus of a normal working week every week. And that's structured at your desk time. And on top of that, I'm constantly traveling. And any time that I'm not in a meeting, on Zoom, talking to a customer, or doing something structured that's diarised, you are thinking about the business all the time. And that's 15 years in. So that's what you're signing yourself up for. And so...
You enjoy that?
Yeah. I mean, it is very demanding job. So I think to just say you enjoy it would be like oversimplification. It'd be a bit like saying to someone that's into trying to be the best marathon runner they can be, do you enjoy training at 4 o'clock in the morning by running 20 miles in the rain in the middle of winter? Probably not that moment, but they enjoy being an athlete, right? So yes, I really enjoy being a founder CEO, whilst noting that, I don't massively enjoy getting on a plane on a Sunday morning, flying away from my family for the 4th week on the trot. But so, it just comes in the box. But you were asking about, like, was I weighing up the risks as we started to, working on Matillion? I guess this will have been the summer of 2010, summer and fall of 2010. Actually, probably the biggest precondition for someone at my stage of life was the support, in my case, of my wife, because if you're going to be a founder, CEO of something that you want to be meaningful, to my point a moment ago, it's all in. And therefore, if you are also worrying about, possibly perfectly validly, supporting your wife or husband or family or other dependents, then you've got to be in a situation where they're okay with you working that hard and for that longer period of time. And it's why I always say, as a bit of a joke, if you want to found a consequential business, the first thing is to either be single or marry well. Yeah. Because if you, it's all in. Like that's the best way I can come of saying it. It's all in for years, and it never lets up. Because you probably walk in and see some nice mugs and a nice sign and lots of people and an office with a sign on. And you think, oh, they've made it. No, this is capitalism. Like, people are trying to kill you all the time, and that's why you're always fully dialed into it, and that's why you've always got to give it like every ounce of available energy. And so if you're not ready for that because you also want or need to distract yourself in lots of other ways, then that's going to be that's not going to work. So it wasn't really the risk of what happens if I do this and it doesn't work. I always thought, well, it's fine. I'm perfectly employable. I can just go back and get another job. And there was a risk, and actually my wife pointed this risk out to me, of not doing it and living to regret it for the rest of my life. But like the real risk that I think that you should evaluate is do you want to, are you situationally set up to, and are you prepared to put every ounce of humanity into doing this for as long as it takes? And the easy way to think about it would be, it's probably the same worldview of saying, oh, do you know what? I really want to win gold in the Olympic 800 meters. Like, no one thinks that you're going to half-ass that, right? You're not going to go home from training halfway through because you're meeting your mates for a curry, if that's what you're trying to do. And that's what it's like trying to build a meaningful business. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Are you looking to win the blue ribbon 100-meter event in gold? You know, silver wouldn't do it for you. What is it that drives you? What is your motivation as a founder?
I think people don't believe me when I say this necessarily, but it's just to build something beautiful. And in terms of a business, I mean. So, you know, it makes the world in its small but focused way better and spin just on a slightly different axis. It makes a dent in the universe bigger than any of us could have managed single-handedly. And, you know, it to a greater or lesser extent, again, within its swim lane, it wins. And you'll notice that I didn't mention anything with a dollar or pound sign on that, because if that is the goal, the best way of doing it is definitely not to be an entrepreneur and set up your own business. Like, just like work hard at university, get good grades, go and get a really good job. Like, that's a much easier way of making money. It has to be about something that it has to be about something bigger than that, just like a desire to win or a desire to build something beautiful. And I think certainly for me, that's the case.
I get that. When we all meet our maker, it won't say on our gravestone, he or she was worth this amount of money, or he or she generated this amount of money. It's how have you changed the world, hopefully for the better.
Yeah.
2014, 2015. So you're 4 years into business. Your business employs 12 people. It's doing less than $1 million ARR, you know, and then you took the decision that you're going to build your own software. Okay. The business today is how big?
So we are, what will it be now? It's 9 digits of recurring revenue. So, and then in team size, we're kind of 400 or 500
big
team members.
In Manchester, big presence in the US.
Manchester, US, and Hyderabad, India are 3 big places.
So you would look back on that decision to build your own software as a seminal moment in Matillion's development?
Yeah, I don't frame it in that way, but there's really been 3 big acts in the history of our company. And it's very easy, and I try not to be, but it's very easy to be revisionist about these things when you look back at them, because, you know, if you tell the story quickly, Act 1, we were a managed solution company. We thought there was this problem in the world that needed solving. We would provide it with a combination of technology we bought in, a little bit of technology we built ourselves, and people. We'd sell that as a managed service, solve the problem. That's the business. And also, we thought that there was a maximum size that business could get to, or a certain size that business could get to, which would make a return interesting to myself and Ed, other co-founders and early investors that supported it. And then later, whilst doing that thing, we discovered that there was another problem in the world that we needed solving for ourselves, but we thought other people might need solving as well. And so we created a piece of technology for our own use to solve that problem.
Which effectively was the shortage of data engineers. That was, if you manufactured your own product, it sort of tackled that problem. Would that be fair? Is that too simple?
At that time, that's what it evolved into. But at that very time, we were building a thing called a data warehouse in the cloud, and we needed better tools for building data warehouses in the cloud. And no one had a really good tool for building data warehouses in the cloud. So we made one for ourselves. And then we thought, I bet lots of people want to do this. So we started selling it. And this is where I say, I have to be careful. I think in general, it probably serves most of us well to be careful on not being too revisionist, because when you look at it backwards, you can craft a brilliant strategic story about it. But, you know, we were 12 guys I think you actually came to these offices back in the day, Chris, in like some very low rent proto WeWork offices in Knutsford with a leak in the roof. And none of us really knew anything about anything. And so some of it's serendipity, some of it's hard work, some of it's like being lucky and smart, both of those things in equal measure, to kind of get yourself in the right neck of the woods of a relevant market. But yeah, you know, if I was sort of trying to tell the story in a way to make me and Ed sound like geniuses, I'd be like, we did one thing, we realized the writing was on the wall, so we became an ISV, built technology that we knew the market would love, and then we launched that, and then we got good again, and now we're doing that a third time. But in real life, what I would say we could credit ourselves with is kind of getting ourselves in the neck of the woods of an interesting industry area, and then by working in it, observing problems, challenges, shortcomings that the industry wasn't yet smoothing out. And then once we realized we were onto something, actually getting after that piece and executing well on it. I think that bit we can credit ourselves to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100% it does. There's a statistic which you quoted at me before, which is there are
Must be true then, Chris.
Must be true. There are fewer unicorn CEOs than there are people who've been into space, right? Which must mean when you became a unicorn in 2021, when you raised $150 million and you hit that valuation, for many people, that would have been, wow, what an amazing moment. I guess from your perspective, that wasn't the case. It was, right, what next?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I signed the term sheet that priced the company at that price in my basement at home at 4 o'clock in the morning. And so I think the immediate thing I wanted to do after, I suppose, the technical moment of becoming a unicorn was probably just like go to bed. And then like next morning woke up. Now, don't get me wrong. When you're building a business, I think you are necessarily looking out of the windshield and down at the dashboard so much that you very rarely go like that and look out the window to take in the view. But sometimes the world manufactures you opportunities to do that. And something like becoming a unicorn, or the moment we went through $100 million of recurring revenue, or actually the first time we raised institutional capital, which was all the way back in 2016, the first time we raised Silicon Valley capital. For me personally, becoming EY Entrepreneur of the Year, you know, those are like little moments that, like, once you've hit them, they can't be taken back, and they're just a reminder to go like that and look out the window. So I don't want to say I wasn't really proud of it at the time, and also there were great opportunities to like congratulate and remind your team the impact of what they're doing. But yeah, there's I think maybe what you're trying to get to with the question, Chris, is does that seem like an end? And both, no, it doesn't seem like it, and B, definitionally it isn't, right? It's just a moment in time valuation of the business that someone's chosen to pay. And of course, my statistic about astronauts, if I said it, I think it was true at the time, but it may not have stayed true very long, because we raised that unicorn valuation in 2021 when not only was our company performing well, so becoming more valuable, but all software companies were becoming more valuable in the same way that all houses become more valuable, right? You can do an extension, decorate it nicely, that improves its value, but also house prices can go up and they can come down. And by 2023, software companies were coming back down. Our company was still growing. I don't know what my business would have been worth in 2023 because I didn't test the market by selling any of it. I'm pretty confident now that you know, my next round would make me very happy and make my shareholders very happy. But I guess it's a nice opportunity to look out the window and celebrate, but it's not an end. So yeah, that like the next thing you do is whatever was the next thing you were going to do anyway. And the reason you get a valuation of any time, regardless of the number, is because you have just entered into an agreement to sell some of the equity in your company in return for cash. That's the thing that you are thinking about. You're thinking, I have just raised $150 million of capital that I can now put on my balance sheet to invest in growing the business. And that's what you think about.
You've spoken before about, like, there's this phenomenon in the UK of founders selling early. And you said the thing that keeps you awake is the idea of leaving something on the table. You know, do you think there is a problem with UK founders selling too early? And what's your big vision, Matthew?
The leaving something on the table for me, that is not actually me talking about the final prognosis for my company, right? So it's the thought of whatever that final prognosis is. That could be me being run over by a steamroller. It could be my board deciding, even I deciding, there is now a better CEO for Matillion. Hopefully this is one day in the distant future. By the way, anyone listening to this, I've got no plans to not be the CEO tomorrow. But yeah, you know, let's say me and the board sit down one day and say, hey, Matthew, you've been really great from taking us from A to B, but we both think there'd be a better person to take us from B to C. And so at that moment, whenever this journey comes to its conclusion for me personally, my fear is looking back and thinking there's something that I could have done but chose not to through fear or laziness that would have made the outcome better to this moment. That's the thing I worry about, leaving something on the table. It's not selling it or not. It's not IPOing it or not. It's not. It's just the thought of if I was too frightened to do something or too lazy to do something, and then later I look back and say, oh yeah, I left opportunity on the table because of that. That's what I mean when I say that. In terms of, do UK founders sell out too early? Well, first of all, it's not really for me to judge someone else's value creation efforts. But I do think that the UK as an economy fails to create large consequential businesses. And there's a lot of quite detailed reasons why. And a lot of it is cultural. Some of it is to do with the size of our domestic market. So if you start a company that sells yoga mats in the US, you've got a very large domestic market. And so by the time you've saturated that domestic market, you're already a very large business. If you create a company that sells yoga mats in the UK, you've only got 60 million people to flog them to. They're all that little bit poorer than US ones. And so by the time you've saturated the UK market, you're not that big a business. So to become a big business, you've got to go and compete in another country. The biggest one's America. And so that pulls the locus of your country to the US and you end up being a US company. That's just a domestic market point. Some of it is about availability of capital. Some of it is around, the role that media society play on celebrating value creation, entrepreneurialism. To quote the line, my dad was a man of few wise words, but one thing he said that was quite wise was, if you do really well, buy yourself a Rolls Royce and drive down Fifth Avenue, people cheer at you. If you do really well, buy yourself a Rolls Royce and drive through a town in Manchester, people key the car. And I think there's an element of that in our society. People don't want to.
Don't want to celebrate success?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Only if, that these things aren't black and white. Life never is. But that there is, there's no... we like beating up the guy that got it wrong, not celebrating the guy that tried or celebrating the guy that was really successful. So none of these things are individual, but there's an attitude to risk, a culture of value creation, flow of capital, domestic market, playbook, all these things combined. My judgment at the Y-intercepts is simple, though. We just don't create enough very large, brand new companies. And the problem with that is that those companies can have a material and positive impact on your economy and all the trickle-down effects from it. So if you don't do it, you don't get those benefits.
Yeah, and the point you make is a point that I've been making for a long time, which a lot of people see the success that a founder might have, the big exit, the big car, the big whatever, the wealth, but they don't see all the risks, all the stress, all the 15 overnight year success story, which Matillion is, goes into it, and the way you give up your life and a lot of the things that a lot of us take for granted. I want to ask you just a couple of more questions, really. There's a quote which you came out with, which was, there are two types of problems in business. The first is people problems, and the second are people problems that you haven't yet worked out are people problems. Is that still the case? I mean, obviously AI is changing that slightly.
Yeah.
People problems, as a founder, is that always going to be your biggest, your biggest consumer of time, your biggest headache, or not?
So, as with all these sorts of like little management raises, and that one has the unusual characteristic of being legitimately something that, as far as I know at least, I said, whereas many of the things I'll say that are in that same gamut of like management advice, that they're other people's things that I'm repeating, but that one I think is me. And the risk with all of them is you have to use them in context. So what I really mean by that phrase is that as a leader, ultimately, let's keep AI out of it for a moment because it's genuinely changing the physics of things. But in general, throughout human history, it's been very hard to achieve something consequential on your own. Yeah. Therefore, you have to have a team. And the job of the team and of the leader of that team is to get it rallied around a goal that it then delivers, and things that stop you there delivering it, and therefore things that you've not quite gotten right in that team yet. And I can remember things where they seem very technocratic. A budget doesn't add up, or a product doesn't resonate in the market, or a customer is unsatisfied or churns. And those things seem like a long way from managing your team. But if you really think about it deeply, it's something in terms of how you have either assembled, enabled, or led a team that's created that thing, right? Maybe culturally people aren't focused on customers enough, so they get poor customer service and therefore don't expand as much as they should, or churn too often, leave bad reviews if you're a restaurant or whatever. That feels like it's a customer reviews problem, but really it's a team and culture problem, right? And or maybe you do have the right team and culture, but there's one particular part of the organization that doesn't. Well, it could well be the manager of that organization isn't the right person for that job. So yeah, I do think that if you want to do anything worthwhile in the world, you normally need a team, and therefore, if all is not running as well as it should, it's incumbent on you as a leader to ask yourself that problem: have I built the right team and given them the environment to succeed and set the right goal for them?
Last question.
But AI is changing things a little bit because you're suddenly getting AIs are doing a lot of the work.
Start with AI, we'll finish with AI.
Yeah.
My final question, which we end every episode of the Naked Founder podcast, is this. There's a tradition in the US where the outgoing president will write a letter to their successor. If you were writing a letter to a young Matthew Scullion or a founder who's thinking about setting up a business, a would-be founder, what advice would you offer that person?
So if I was writing it to myself with the benefit of hindsight, I mean, first of all, Chris, I'm not sure that the young Matthew Scullion would listen to it. So probably right. Enjoy yourself, have fun, work hard. And do you know what? I don't look back on many of the things that I've been lucky enough to live through and get to do, and think to myself, but given the information I had at the time, I would change what I've done. Now, that's not for a split second, mate, saying that I've got everything right. I've got loads of howlers, but the only way that I could have not done those howlers is to know something that it would have been almost impossible to know at that time. So
if you're offering that advice to a founder, then?
If I was offering it to a founder, love to give that advice. And so, first of all, I'd say, before you start this, make sure you really want to, because I think everybody thinks, I once knew a guy, in fact, I still do know him, he's a friend of mine, and he said, I am going to go and be the CEO of a company because I want an easier career. And I just thought to myself, that is the most insane thing I've ever heard. Now, he's taken that job and he's gotten an easier career, but also the business has done nothing. And so I suppose that is a way of doing it if you're not interested in making it better. But yeah, leading anything, I don't think is a career that you should choose if what you are optimizing for is an easy time. So the first thing I'd say to people is, you sure you really want to do this? And then the second thing I'd say to people is, the number one most universal piece of advice for all entrepreneurs is, in order to be an entrepreneur, you must start. And then once you've started, do not stop. And the reason I say that is, I know far, far more people that sit in a metaphorical pub talking about the business that they will one day build, or whining about the business that they currently work in and the fact that they didn't build it. Most people don't start. Yeah. And then once you've started, don't stop. So, I think this is probably the same in all sorts of teams, be it sports teams or non-profits or government or military or certainly business building and entrepreneurialism. A very high percentage of the stuff that you do on a given day, week, month, quarter, or year doesn't work or goes wrong. It's a bit like tennis. So in tennis, you lose a very high percentage of the points that you play, and you become the best player in the world, not by winning every point, but by consistently winning slightly more than half of the points.
Was it Roger Federer who said that he's only ever won 54% of the points that he's played?
Correct, which makes him the best player in the world, 54%. So life in business is a bit like that. I suspect the percentages are worse for business people. But the point I'm going to make is it definitely ain't all going to go right. And a lot of stuff is going to go wrong all the time. And actually, your job as a leader is going to be dealing a lot more with the wrong stuff because your team take care of the stuff that goes right. So what you definitely have to, in my opinion at least, what I definitely think serves you well in business building is, start then don't stop. On the don't stop side, if you think about what that is, that's about resilience. It's about learning. It's around, nothing wrong with trying something not working, slightly more wrong with keep trying the same thing and it's still not working, not reacting to it. That's Einstein's definition of insanity, isn't it? But yeah, that's like the universal advice I always give to people that are thinking of starting up a business, start then don't stop. And then after that, it kind of gets into like actual education, which I couldn't give you in one clippy line at the end of a podcast, Chris.
Listen, you've given me lots of clippy lines at the end of this podcast. So massive thank you to you, Matthew Scullion. That's the end of the Naked Founder podcast, the podcast where nothing is hidden. Massive thank you to our sponsors, Financial, the home of money for women. If you've enjoyed the Naked Founder podcast, please tell your friends, please press that subscribe button. And as always, stay safe. My name, as always, is Chris Maguire.